because without your health, like, you can't enjoy anything else you've worked for, and you can't show up for those things, that are most important and matter most. Creatine has so many benefits for building muscle mass, maintaining muscle mass as you age, bone density, but also cognitive benefits and preventing cognitive decline. And most people resign to the fact that once your prime is come and gone, especially after a decade has gone by, that you're not going to get that back, and so I'm all in. I'm willing to give everything I have, to do everything in my power, to get my health back. I'd always tried to, again, live out my faith, like Paul says, to live as Christ, to die as gain. And so really not a lot of fear of my own death or my own mortality. But having kids really changed that.
Like, we are, 12 hours apart. We are like on opposite sides of the globe, right? But the things that you have shared and the challenges that you experienced, I guess, is universal.
And we are started. Hey everyone, how's everyone doing?
Welcome back. This is our 6th episode of the Two Dads podcast, where we talk about all things dad. So Aloysius, I understand we have a very special guest today.
Right? Oh yes, we do. I have been chatting with this individual for a couple of conversations on social media, and I've been following his journey. It has been quite inspiring. He has taught me quite a lot of interesting stuff, and a couple of questions I want to ask him as well, in today's episode, because he has so much to share.
Yes. So in case everyone is wondering who this person we have invited here on our podcast for the very first time, in fact, he is someone who has to have overcome the challenges of cancer, had his fitness stripped away during that time, and has to work his way back to health. He is also a father of 2, right? Just like you, Aloysius, you're a father of 2. I wish to be there as well one day. And then
you will.
So without further ado, let us invite with us here in this podcast, Craig, also known as Second Prime on Instagram. Hello.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, welcome. So maybe let's kickstart with a simple question. So your Instagram handle is called Second Prime, right? Maybe you give us a short little snippet of why you chose that to be your Instagram handle, and let's see if we can work our way into your whole inspiration behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was someone that really had a love affair with fitness beginning back in high school. It was a long story there. I won't go too far into, but we were talking before we started recording about growing up during Michael Jordan's heyday, and being around that area and just having a love for basketball. And so during my high school days, I was really living in a competitive area, and my love for basketball motivated me to get into the gym to try to perform better, to be able to make the team and things like that. And that's when I got started with weightlifting, strength training, things like that, and went from being 6'2", 150 pounds to within a matter of like 3 to 5 months, gaining 15 pounds of muscle, having my bench press go up by all these numbers. And now all of a sudden this skinny, scrawny kid is like the strong guy amongst his friends and things like that. And really loved that, and feeling strong, feeling fit. And so just kind of went from there into, in college, I went to a small Christian school in Indiana, and walked on to the football team, having never played football before, but just, and that was something where just a testament to where my fitness had grown to, where just having the speed and the size and the strength to be able to compete. Now, we can dig in further later if you want about trying to pick up a sport you never really played before, at any sort of high competitive level at picking it up in college. And so I was mostly on the practice team, but then that kind of rolled over into a career where I became a personal trainer. And through my 20s, like, fitness was life. Fitness was so much of who I was and what I was doing. And I sort of built my body up to be able, from both a performance and an aesthetic standpoint, to, be able to hit some fairly high numbers and impressive strength numbers and performance numbers. And so I was looking at that time as my prime, and I always envisioned myself always being the fit guy, always being in shape. I never had plans to slow down or to take a step back. And, I look back now and I'd say my performance probably peaked around the age 28, 29. And I can look back now and say, the time when I thought I was in the best shape of my life was actually just a year or two out from my health, starting to decline and really doing so over the course of a decade. And so I look back at that time and like, that's my prime. And I think most people resign to the fact that once your prime is come and gone, especially after a decade has gone by, that you're not going to get that back, And so part of my story is, a year and a half ago, reaching this sort of tipping point or this breaking point where it was, hey, if I don't make some changes with all the health challenges and the deteriorating health I've had, and I told my wife, if something doesn't change, I'm going to die. Like maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but the trajectory I'm on has just been this increasing number of health challenges compounding on one another to the point where now I'm exhausted, I'm worn down, I'm weak. I've had cancer, I've had mold toxicity, all the chronic inflammation and fatigue and different things, that have just gotten worse and not better. So it's like, I can see the writing on the wall where this is headed if I continue like this. And so that began, it was about a year and a half, 18 months ago or so, the start of this journey to reclaim my health. It involved a lot, and we can dig deeper into that, like resetting my lifestyle essentially. And through that, over the course of a year, I was able to sort of do that, where I reset my lifestyle, brought my health back up from what I would call like a deficit, where the best example I can give is like, when you're operating from a place of neutrality from a health standpoint, you get returns on your effort that you put into the gym. So when you go, the harder you work, the more effort and results you get. And now you got to, recover right and eat right and all that. But in general, that basic principle, and I had sort of gotten this to this point where it was more of an inverse result. When the harder I worked, the more setbacks I would have. So it took me about 12 months to get to the point where I felt back to this point of a neutrality with my health, where I could go back into the gym and now I could start pushing it again. And getting to that point was huge for me. And that's what sort of triggered the idea. Like, now that I'm back there, like now I can do what I was used to doing. I can grind again. I can get in there and work hard. And let's see, if I can get it back to close to where I was. I may not hit every number that I was at before. And this is really a long answer to your short question, but I may not hit every number I did before, but my metrics have changed a little, knowing that I could be at 28 or, in the best shape of my life and actually just be a year or two out from my health collapsing, meaning that maybe, performance, strength, and even aesthetics aren't the sole metric or the best metric for being healthy. And there's a lot of other things that go into overall health. Your body is made up of a number of different systems. You've got everything from a digestive system to a lymphatic system that helps drainage of toxins, to immune system and nervous system, and where a lot of us are overstressed and overworked, and our nervous system is out of whack, and we're in fight or flight all the time. And so when you address all those different aspects and look, deeper than just the external or your performance based or strength standards, that's what I'm more concerned about now. And so, while maybe I could bench, my most I ever did was bench 300 pounds 9 reps, and pretty high number. But, if I never get back to that, but I can do 300 a couple times, and maybe I can't run a 5:22 mile anymore, but I can run a 6:30 mile, and maybe I can't do 37 pull-ups, but I can do 25 or 30 and have these high performance standards, but be more mobile, not have muscle tension, not have even some of the aches and pains and stuff that, had I known what I know now, I wouldn't have just sort of dismissed and pushed through back when I was in my first prime. So I think there's ways where, if I'm healthier, I'm not getting sick, I've got more energy, I'm not tight and sore, I'm more mobile, then, to me, I could look at that and say, I'm in the best shape of my life now at 40, even though I don't hit quite as high highs in certain numbers. So to answer your question, it's really this idea of, you're not past your prime, you're just in between them, it's not your age that has caused you to have this decline in health, decline in performance, to lose your fitness. It has far more to do with your lifestyle and your environment. And if you're willing to change those things, you can really thrive from a health and a physical standpoint, a fitness standpoint, into your 30s, 40s, 50s, and even beyond. And so that's really the motivation, the idea behind Second Prime is just, let's work together. Let's get it back. Let's make those changes, reset our lifestyle, reclaim our health, and reach our Second Prime. So,
yeah,
I nice yeah, because
I love it. So yeah, maybe Aloysius, you go first. Yeah,
I think for me and CK, we both have the same kind of experiences, which sort of make us, change our lifestyle to reclaim our Second Prime, because we were going through a phase of our 30s and, being dads. And it sort of struck us, that, we need to be back at our prime, because we felt, a lot of unhealthy lifestyles, unhealthy diets, and health is going down, a lot of aches, pains all over the body, issues with health. And these are really pretty scary when we think about it, that we are just in our 30s and these are all happening. That's why I think CK and I also start to embark on a journey, and that's when we chance upon Craig's Instagram as well and it's sort of inspired. For me myself, I've been following almost every day and seeing inspirational postings from there. Yeah, CK, you were about to share something.
Yeah, I can really relate to what Craig you just mentioned, because Aloysius and I, we both also had this same idea where we were once this very young, healthy individual. We could like run. I mean, we both have to go through national service, so it's the army, right, in Singapore, and we were like at our prime. That was our peak. We were in our 20s, right, and then fatherhood struck and poop. We got the belly, I got cholesterol and stuff like this. And then, we decided that, it's not the way to go. If we really do want to watch our kids grow up, play with our kids, run with our kids, something has to change. And I think it really synchronizes with the fact that you decided to name your Instagram Second Prime. And the moment I read that name, it resonated. So yeah, really, really fortunate to have a chance upon your channel. So if it's okay with you, maybe we could just rewind a little bit back to the part where you mentioned your health was sort of compromised, because it is not something that you can control, right? Not like parenthood is something that we can, sort of plan for and stuff like this. It's something outside of what you can decide to happen to you. What was it like? What did you feel back then? Because I'm sure a lot of parents and a lot of individuals out there, they want to become fit, they want to stay healthy, right? But the situation around them prevents them from doing so. I can speak from my experience. I just had my newborn, right? Of course, it's a condition that it's a situation where I can control, but how my newborn reacts to the environment around her, whether she gets sick, whether my wife gets sick, these are things I can't control. And sometimes, this sort of piles up and I can no longer find the time, nor find the determination, the willpower to stay fit or to do the things that I love, right? So what was it like for you? Health is definitely at the top of the list of challenges. What was your feeling like, and how did you get past that period of time?
Yeah, so there's been so many different things where hindsight has given clarity to, where when you're going through it, you don't really know what the catalyst is for the decline of your health. You don't know what's sort of precipitating that, and so it was. I can look back now and see this chain of events start, sort of this domino effect. And I can go all the way back to my 20s when I was in good shape and say, there's some habits that probably weren't great then, and I could get away with them because I was young, and, and you can kind of get away with some unhealthy lifestyle habits and choices. But one of the things that led to my health starting to fall off was I went from being a personal trainer as my career in my 20s, and I know you guys resonate with, being Christian men. And so I had actually felt called into ministry in my 20s. And so I ended up selling my training business and going to seminary. to train to be in ministry. And so I went from a job that allowed me to be on my feet, to be active and mobile and, helping these clients. But then when they weren't there, I was in a gym, I was in my own little studio there. I could work out, stretch, do whatever I needed to do, to going to seminary where I was sitting for 9 hours a day, doing classwork, and then at night doing, my homework and reading, and a lot of reading in seminary. And, I'd still fit a workout in, when I could, but, my diet changed. I was on a budget now. I was trying to eat things that were quick and easy to make. I wasn't spending as much time with food prep. And so there was these subtle changes, or not so subtle, to my lifestyle. And sitting was a big issue, where like my muscles started to tighten up. And you can sit, and you probably know this, how detrimental sitting can be. Some people argue it's worse for you than smoking. It just, the way it restricts your circulation, and you can actually, like, you have like psoas muscles and stuff like that can sort of pinch or clamp down on your digestive tract and cause more digestive discomfort and things like that. And so so looking back, there were these things I could point to, but at the same time, when you're in it, you sort of feel like this thing is happening to you that you can't really control. And it was a slow fade over 8 or 10 years. It started with digestive discomfort and pain and some food sensitivities, and this weird thing where I'd eat and I wasn't sure exactly what it was I was eating, but like my midsection, my skin would like feel like it was itching and crawling. And then I'd get these like lipomas, which are these, fatty deposit like things. They almost look like little like tumors, but around my midsection, and those would get inflamed and tender. And, I'm like, what's going on? What's causing this? And then I'd get this bad pain on my right side while I was sleeping. And it was kind of a mix, I think, of that psoas muscle being tight and, like an IBS. And then so I started adjusting my diet and not eating as much because I could manage the symptom. But then if you're trying to still like push through on workouts and stuff like that, and you're not fueling your body right, that leads to more tension and inflammation. And so all these things started compounding. And so all that to say, as your health spiraling out of control, you don't really, it's hard to point to it, but other people, and this is why I started the site, because like, I think there's a lot of people like me, but it's not that their scenarios exactly like, it's not that, they had these health challenges that are preventing them from staying in shape necessarily. They weren't necessarily diagnosed with any chronic issues or cancer or anything. But whether or not it was, something that happened to you, or something based off of your lifestyle changes, or, you decided to go back to school, or you're a parent, or you went to work, or, some people got too busy, some people got too lazy, some people got sick, some people got hurt. There's all sorts of different reasons for, that health, letting it slip and letting that prime get away from you. But I think there's just a lot we can resonate. So I'm going to kind of bring it back now. I know it was a roundabout way of just setting the stage to answer your question, but finding the time to do that, like how you work that in, is a challenge. But what I want to challenge people is, there are things that are so second nature to what you do because of how you learn growing up, that's just, part of self-care. So whether it's taking a shower each day, or brushing your teeth each day, or, there's other things that we just have, our second nature. We don't think about them as, oh, I don't have time to do that. It's just like, no, that's a non-negotiable. We do that. That's just how we live. And unfortunately, I know American culture is one way. I'm not sure how it is over there, but it is just counter to what is good for human thriving in a lot of ways. These second nature lifestyle habits, daily rhythms that we've built in that we don't think about and we just do. A lot of them aren't really healthy. So what I want to challenge people to do is to sort of give yourself a period of time where you're willing to take a step back, look at those lifestyle habits, those daily rhythms, and rethink them and challenge them a little bit. And what if you could make things that prioritize your health just part of your daily rhythms? And I know that sounds idealistic, but like, it's hard to pump out a really hard workout when you're exhausted and you're kid was up all night and you got 2 or 3 hours of sleep, and and it's 10 p.m. You're like, I gotta get sleep now because baby's gonna wake me up in like 2 hours. Like, I get that, but there are other things that you can do to improve your health. Just moving, deep breathing. If you have access to a sauna, grounding, walking barefoot outside, getting sunlight, going for a walk, like these things don't take near as much strain, and they can be really beneficial for your, everything from your lymphatic system to your nervous system, the stress, the cortisol levels, all these things. And so it's kind of just like, what can I do today to just move that needle forward, even if I can't get the full workout, even if I can't give it my all. And a lot of times when I do those things first, then it actually allows me, like by the time I'm done doing some deep breathing and going for a walk, or I'll do a little silly stuff like just a little bit of jumping in place can like get lymphatic drainage going, but it also energizes you. So now it's easier. Maybe now I can roll that over into a 15-minute workout, something like that. So again, sorry for being long-winded in my answers, but and if I didn't answer your question, let me know. But that's kind of how I view it.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. So, Craig, you mentioned about this lymphatic drainage, and I think in your recent post on Instagram, you mentioned about that as well. And I thought that's something interesting because not a lot of people know what that is and how that is beneficial to our body and our own, personal well-being. And you showed in Instagram that you were just, doing some jumps and getting all that out. So maybe could you share a little bit more about that,
Yeah. So, your body is really smart and really this, miraculous creation from God and all its systems and what they're designed to do. And your body has a way of detoxing itself and, getting rid of these pathogens that aren't supposed to be in there. And, there's a couple different ways it does that. And a lot of your different organs and things are involved, your gallbladder and your liver and, your, then your lymph nodes, this lymphatic drainage with this lymph fluid you have basically in there, are all responsible for helping kind of flush out, grab those toxins and flush them out. But I think, this is a little bit of, my own diagnosis, but I think there's truth to it. It's just like, there's such a influx and overwhelm of toxins now that we're exposed to that, the human body wasn't really exposed to maybe 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, over the course of human history. Because we've got, there's chemicals in our air, there's chemicals in our water, there's, there's chemicals in our food, and there's just like, it's just, everywhere you look, there's just, we've got, one thing I talk about, like, the underwear you're wearing, they found microplastics in men's testicles, every testicle they've checked. So like your clothes, even you're absorbing these toxins and you're putting lotions and shampoos and different stuff, on your body. It's almost like unavoidable. You're just from every side you're bombarded. And so you combine that with, some less than ideal lifestyle habits, especially becoming sedentary, not moving. That's going to slow down this lymphatic system and start to clog it up where it's not going to do what it's supposed to do. And, part of my story that sort of led to the final straw that broke the camel's back was I was living in a house, me and my family, for about 6 months that had black mold that we discovered after the fact that there was black mold in there. And we discovered it because we were all pretty much sick for 6 months straight. And it was just a Hail Mary effort to just say, I feel like, normally your house is supposed to be this like refuge, this place where you can come and recharge. And I was like, for some reason, like, it's just like an intuition. Like, I feel like where we're living is making us sick. That this environment, instead of being a place to recover, is actually making us worse. So we got it tested. There was black mold, explained a lot. We're still doing detoxes to get that out of our body. The mycotoxins from that kind of linger and are stubborn and hard to get out. But while I was there, I was getting regularly sick, but you could see the lymph nodes, on my neck, like just, my glands, my lymph nodes and stuff just sort of swollen and just, again, evidence that it wasn't able to keep up. It wasn't flushing things out. So part of my journey in recovery and building in new rhythms is doing stuff just to sort of encourage that lymphatic drainage. And there's several different things that you can do. Obviously, the best things you can do are just being active. Limit how long you're sedentary. Regular exercise, a healthy diet, drinking plenty of water. Like those are all things that are just on a base level. But if you need a little extra help, there are things like the jumping, or called, a lot of people do rebounding on a little trampoline, but I don't have a little trampoline. I literally just jump like I'm jump roping without a jump rope in place at home. And I'll do that. And I like to do that, kind of around when I'm going to eat, both before and after, because I found aids in my digestion as well. It just sort of moves things down a little bit. But jumping, anything with impact, running, things like that are going to aid that lymphatic drainage. You can do something called dry brushing, where you literally take a dry brush and you work the around. There's certain spots where like your lymph nodes are, where you should target like right around here and your stomach and under your armpits and different places like that. And so you can work. It's all in the same direction with this brush. Working at, I think it's towards your heart on that, and just assist in that lymphatic drainage. Things like infrared sauna can assist with that. The castor oil packs, I don't know if you guys have heard of that. That can kind of assist with that as well. So there's lots of different things that you can do, but by getting that to move along, you're going to aid your body in getting those toxins and pathogens out of you, which is just going to boost your immune system as well. It's kind of intricately tied to that. So,
yeah. Side question: do you think that will help with my hair loss? Okay, no. The reason why I say this is because you mentioned you found black mold in the house, and how a house is supposed to be a place where you go back to recharge and rejuvenate, right? I found out that I think the boiler in my house has rust in it. If you don't change it over time, 10 years, 20 years, rust starts to form. And I think because we shower with it every day, the body either absorbs some kind of toxin or what. And everyone in my family is starting to lose hair. So yeah, I can totally
It's not
diet. Diet. I hope it's not diet. But yeah, I totally feel you when you mentioned that the house is supposed to help you recover, but it's doing the opposite effect, right? So and if your body is not already compromised, it can't take any more hits, and that's where everything starts to shut down. So back to the whole importance of how to maintain your body, like you said, simple jumps every day helps, so on and so forth. So yeah, that sort of resonated with me.
Yeah, and there's a lot of contributing factors to it that could be to hair loss. But one of my principles, I think, is like the basic, what are the most foundational, needs for human survival? I would say breathing, air, oxygen, and water. If you don't have water for a couple of days, you'll die. And so obviously then you can go to food and different things like that. But so when someone's at a health deficit, I think one of the greatest places to start and sort of invest, if you have some money that you can put towards it, is clean air and clean water. And that's been sort of a bedrock of the decisions we made. It was sort of the first thing when we got out of that mold house, just sort of saying, we're going to ensure that the air we're breathing and the water we're drinking are not adding to this toxin overload and overwhelm. And there's so many different things, from mold to allergens, dust, pollen, different things like that in your home, that if, like you said, you're already sort of at this point of overwhelm where you got some other things going on, any of those things can kind of trigger an immune response that start to see you become sick more regularly and things like that. So we invested in a couple air purifiers that we have in our home, and we actually moved to a new build because I was like, I don't even trust like a house that's been built for 20 years anymore, because I think statistically they almost all have mold, and even a new build can, because if the builders aren't taking proper precautions and stuff while they're building. But just far less likely. Felt a much more controllable situation too. After we were in that situation, my whole family was sick. You're just kind of like, yeah, we're not going to go back into that situation. But I don't think I'll ever live somewhere again without, a couple of really good air purifiers, running that can just help clean that stuff out of the air. And then we invested in a reverse osmosis system and a whole house water filtration system. So the reverse osmosis is just under the sink. That's our drinking water. Then we have this other filtration system that does all the water in the house, so the stuff for showering and things like that. And it doesn't go quite as hard as the reverse osmosis in terms of literally getting everything out of it, but it targets a lot of the key contaminants that are in our water. And so I don't know, if that's an option for you, but something you definitely could consider if there's a way to filter it. And you'd have to filter it after it's been in the boiler. It sounds like, if the boiler you think might be contributing to it, but there might be some options there. So
CK is going to move house soon, so yeah, one of the housewarming gift I can think of right now is an air purifier.
Water filter. Just giving you some ideas.
I will go for the cheaper ones.
And I think like part of the conversation too is like, I think so many people, they feel overwhelmed. They feel like this I need to start reclaiming my health. We've been sick. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired. But then there's this like financial component. It's like a lot of that sounds like it's going to cost a lot of money. And there's two ways to look at it. First, there is a plethora of changes you can make that are completely free that will boost your health. And so I try to emphasize those while also saying, but if you're to the point where like, everything's, that switch is flipped and now you're in this point of almost like this chronic, being chronically ill, just, to the point where I got, it's like, you may think I can't afford, a couple $1,000s on these things. And I get that, but at the same time, like you can't afford not to, and not being in debt does no good if you're dead, and what I found was I spent some money I didn't have to get my health back, to invest in my health. And what it enabled me to do is go from a position where like I lacked all motivation and ambition, from a career standpoint because of how bad I felt, to when I got my health back, got my energy back, had a little more, I didn't have the brain fog I was dealing with. And now I could put more into, my job, and I've been more successful in that, and gotten more commission. I've got, my wife works from home part-time, and she can only really get stuff done when I take over for the kids. Well, now I have more to give to create capacity for her to work more. So now she's making more income. So there's almost this element where it's this investment that's going to give you a return if you can get your health back, especially with that such a deficit that, sometimes it stinks either way, but, ultimately you're not going to thrive from a career standpoint or financially if you get to this point where you've got medical bills and you can't work hard and, all this sort of stuff. And then the other thing is like, I would say, maybe you think you can't afford to do it, but you can't afford not to, because the other thing that you're going to lose are the things, that money can't buy that are priceless. And, you can't invest and show up and be there as a parent and as a husband, and as a follower of Christ. Like if you feel like you've been really neutered or made impotent in a sense in terms of like your effectiveness in those roles and those relationships, like that could potentially have a far more of a cost, than spending a little bit of money you don't have. So, I want to be sensitive to everyone's financial situation, but also encourage kind of both sides of it, where there's a lot of free stuff you can do, but also if you're on the fence about spending the money, I think there's very few things that are more worth your investment, than your physical health.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting perspective, because a lot of the times people fuss over, just the $10-20 in a gym membership, or just spending $100 on a pair of shoes so that they can go to for a run, right? But they don't see the other side that once your health is compromised, you are actually spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills and hospital fees, and at that point in time, you kind of wish you spend that $10, just to get the gym membership, just keep healthy, and maybe potentially avoid such a situation. So I guess a lot of the times people, when they are healthy, they don't really think about it, and it just takes that one spark for them to, kind of regret their decision. So yeah, thank you for putting things into perspective for us, because I too faced that similar issue, right? I thought my health was fine. I've been eating sloppily, being too liberal with my diet, right? Until my cholesterol hit the roof. There was a scale, right? I think 190 milligrams, or I'm not sure how they calculated it, right? Was the limit of the scale. I overshot the scale by, I don't know, 10 or 20 points. So if your cholesterol is not even measurable within the scale, that's an issue. So thankfully I was protected by age, right? Still hopefully not too old. I'm 33. Right? So the doctor said, thanks to my age, I was still protected. Otherwise, it would have been, I could have gotten a cardiac arrest. So yeah, that was a very big scare for me. And at that point in time, I felt that, hey, instead of the medical bills, I rather put my finances into something, investing into my health. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying, Aloysius. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's really a great sharing. A lot of perspective. I've learned a lot from Craig just by listening to what you have just shared. The investment part is really something. I mean, in Asian context, especially in Singapore, people don't want to invest in money that they couldn't see or forecast the outcome and the results. But these are really things that we should not, say no to. And especially we know that there are gains that we are seeing, and the gains is not immediate, because it's like getting back your second prime, working out, getting the fitness and the health back. It's not overnight. It's a progress that you need to endure and persistent with consistency and discipline. And ultimately, down the road, 6 months or even a year later, that the results and the investment will return back. And that's when we know that this investment that I have spent back then, it is worth it. And I think it's similar to how insurance works. We get insurance to protect our health, protect our loved ones, and we don't see the results now. But one day, if anything really happens, this will actually benefit our own self, our health, our family, because it serves as a excessive safety net for them, families. Yeah.
Yeah. I really wish, there was a way, because it just seems like human nature, right? Like, when you have health, you're not going to value it in the right way, and it's not till you've lost your health a little bit that you really appreciate it. You understand that that's the greatest wealth, in a sense, like, because without your health, like, you can't enjoy anything else you've worked for, and you can't show up for those things, that are most important and matter most. And so, that'd be one thing that I wish that you could just sort of like instill upon someone and force upon them and say, like, don't wait till it, till it fails. Like, preventative health, like doing these measures, really valuing it, in the same similar way to someone that's lost it now and reached that breaking point and reached that all-in point where it's like, I hit that defining moment where it's like, I got to do something now. And if I don't do something, it's going to get far worse. And, and so I'm all in, I'm willing to give everything I have, to do everything in my power, to get my health back. And, if you could just transfer a similar perspective to someone that hasn't yet experienced the health decline, that's what I would love to be able to inspire people towards as well. Not just the people that are already, I'm past my prime, I lost it, but also like, I got a lot of young guys following me, just because I made a post about like how much I used to be able to bench press or something like that. And so for those young guys, it'd be just, that would be it. It's just, don't, so often like our wisdom comes in hindsight, but like, I think, there's a lot of wisdom, being a wise man is not waiting until you learn the hard way. It's, instead of hindsight, it's foresight. It's being able to see ahead into the future, possible consequences for your actions or inaction, and then being able to, adjust and enter in with the same level of discipline and focus that someone that learned the hard way would. And so I was coming back to like, and they're almost cliche, it's like you need 3 things in order to be successful changing your health. And the first is desire. And it's like that seems obvious, but like I think we don't understand that desire is a huge spectrum, and like you can desire something. Like I desire to win the lottery, I desire to play in the NBA, I desire, it's all these things where it's like, yeah, that would be great, I would love to do that, but I don't desire it in a way that changes my daily actions. I don't actually do anything to pursue that end. And I posted a story on Instagram the other day about a client that I had, and she's became a good friend over the years, but she was a smoker her whole life. She'd smoked for like 35 years. She tried to, quit smoking dozens of times, and she'd make it a couple weeks and ultimately fail. And she texts me every year now on that anniversary, and it was just her 11th anniversary of her last cigarette. And and we had talked about, what was the difference? How was this time successful where the past wasn't? And she said, in the past, it was always someone else wanted it for me. I tried to quit because I knew that I should, or, because, my family encouraged me to, or wanted me to. And she said, but I never really wanted it. It was like, I know I should, but I don't necessarily, it's not coming from within. And so, the time she was successful was like, it's the first time that I actually wanted to, quit. I was done with it. I didn't want that in my life anymore. And that's what made her successful. And so you really have to have that desire where, it's not just because, well, I should be healthy. I know I should be doing these things, but no, I want these things and I'm ready to do what it costs to get these things. And so, just kind of inspire people to find your why, and to, kind of reflect on these things so you don't wait until, your health is gone and now you're climbing to get it back. But so you got to have desire, you got to have hope. So you have to believe that change is possible. So I can desire something, but if I don't have hope, if I don't have belief that I can actually attain it, then I'm not going to go after it, right? I'm not even going to start because it's a exercise in futility. And so, so you have to have hope. And so, for me, there was a few things where I was just overwhelmed, like, got to do something, don't know what to do. And just by chance, we had a friend that's a dietitian that's involved in this nutrigenomics thing where they look at your genetics and how certain genes respond to different nutrients, and they can predict how your body will respond to different environmental factors and different things like that. And so you get more of a targeted approach when you're talking about how am I going to change my nutrition to address the health issues that I'm dealing with. And so it was like just this thing that it was like this newer idea, because I was a personal trainer for years, right? Like I knew the basics, like I could get someone out of shape, in shape, overweight, to lose weight, skinny, to be muscular. Like I knew those types of things. I knew basic nutrition principles, but I didn't know how to fix myself or, where to start. And so for me, that was huge. That gave me hope. And then the last is know-how. And that was a part of that too. That gave me know-how. So, you can have desire and you can have hope, belief that change is possible. But if you don't know what to do, what tangible steps to take, you're not going to be successful. And so I think that's where a coach comes in, and that's, something I want to get into a little bit more too, is some programming. I've been a personal trainer for 17 years, essentially. And I don't do it full time right now, but just wanted to get back into it. And so doing some programming online, offering some training services in some different ways. And, it's not something you necessarily have to have your whole life, but if you don't know where to start, like, investing in that, having someone that does, that can give you some guidance, is a great place. So those three things, desire, hope, and know-how, I think are essential. And without those, you're not going to be successful in any health endeavor.
So you talk about these three big things, right? Desire, hope, and know-how. So I think a lot of people, they have the desire, they have the hope, they have the know-how, but there's just so many things out there, and so many guides, so many hows and what. So how do they actually, get them started? Because a lot of times they will say that, oh, there's so many things that let's just not get started, even though I have the desire, because I lose the interest after finding out that there's so many things. It's so daunting. And I think one of the things that you shared previously in your Instagram posts as well is having that one-time major shift and change rather than progressive change. Because from my standpoint, a marginal change is a better, because it's easier. People wouldn't see that it's so daunting. I have to do so many adjustments. I have to go running. I have to do my dieting change, nutrition change. I have to change my lifestyle. In talking about all this, it's literally a lot of things to change in just one night. But for me, I do it step by step and it works for me. But I think for your case is different, right? So how would you go about with this kind of, issues that people are facing? Many people are facing these issues, and it's real.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think all those things, desire and hope and know-how, are all like a spectrum. And so I think if you really have those to the full, then maybe you aren't going to be overwhelmed as much, and you're going to really be so motivated that no matter how much it takes, like you're going to, be all in. But not everybody is to that like total, kind of, I don't know, come to Jesus moment or whatever it is, where it's just like, I got to do something now, or
moment.
and this defining moment in their life. And as I encourage people to, don't wait until you get to this point where your health is really failing you before you do something, then it is recognizing that not everybody is going to be maybe at that same level of motivation. But I do think it's important. And I think that, reflecting on that, I think, you can't always affect how you feel, but I think we can influence it. And I think we can do some reflection and, listen to people, podcasts, different things like that, that can be a motivator for us, so that we do increase that desire. Because I think that's so important. I mean, I've trained hundreds of people, over the years, and I've seen people that show up regularly and they do their workout, and overall they're engaging in a positive habit. It's going to, it's going to build some equity in their health. But they don't see significant like aesthetic changes or strength changes or, things like that, because, all they ever do is come in for the workout that I give them. They're not making other changes, in life. So, it's what are your goals? How driven are you? But then the other side is like, how do you meet people where they're at and make it accessible? And so like, if you only have 10 minutes to work out, like that's way better than, anything else. And if you work out hard for 10 minutes and then you make sure you're just getting up from your seat or your desk every hour or so and moving around and, making some other changes, I think that is part of it too. But yeah, for me, being all in is just a motivator. If I'm going to start something, it's like almost like a placebo effect. Like if I get a new supplement when I'm going to the gym, like I just lift harder because maybe this supplement is going to be like this thing that gives me, change, and I'm motivated by that. And so I think like when I'm starting something new and I say, well, I'm going to do sort of a lifestyle reset, for me, it's like, give me a bunch of things all at once. Like, let's start, let's clean slate, start over. Let's build something new. And I get really excited about, the more I do, the more change I'm going to see. But my wife's the opposite. She's like, she needs very bite-sized, very, a progression of things. So, so I think there's a lot there in terms of how do you sort through what all there is out there. And, I think that just, by chance, like, some people are going to come across my page, and I think that, I can help them. But if you find someone else that resonates with you, and there's a lot out there, you can't believe everything. I think it's good to, have a little bit of a discerning mindset where, one, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But there are people that honestly like make their living on Instagram by being combative. They come out and they just tell you why everything else sucks and, different things like that. And so it's hard. There's a lot to sort through. I like to think that I'd be a good resource for people. And, as I think through, one of the things I want to do, as I talked about, is some programming, is roll out I don't know if it's going to be 3 months or 6 months, but like a midlife reset, where it walks you through not just a fitness training program, but really these other wellness activities that we've talked about, and slowly implements those. And we're going to start by building a foundation in your core and mobility, in your ankles and knees and hips and everything like that, so that you feel, looser. It's kind of a crawl before you walk, before you run mentality as you develop the physical, but then, incorporate these things for lymphatic drainage and improving your digestion and resetting your nervous system, and doing the deep breathing and the grounding and the sauna and the cold plunges and, all these other things, the dry brushing, like that you can incorporate for overall health to address these other systems, and to do that in a way that sort of progressively builds upon, each other. And I think the progression is so important, so that you don't overwhelm people and just say, here's a plan, I want you to do 20 new things today. I think that that's kind of my mindset in it. And then you'll have people that are a little bit more gung-ho. Maybe they read ahead and they start implementing some other things first. But yeah, I think giving it to people and digestible amounts, but still not compromising that all-in mentality. I think you got to have that mindset, that you're going to do what it takes to be successful. So,
yeah.
Wow.
Cool. Yep. So, you mentioned something interesting just now, which is the cold plunge, right? So let's talk about that for a little bit. So, I think Aloysius and I both have been recommended that sometimes we feel sore, sometimes we have a muscle injury, right? It's good to take an ice bath. Just plunge yourself in cold water. Maybe you can share a little bit about the benefits of doing so. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I'll say too is like most of the stuff that I'm talking about, I think that when you look at the population as a whole, they will be beneficial for the majority of the population, but there are always exceptions to that. And so, I'd mentioned the other day, hey, pretty much everybody should be taking creatine. Creatine has so many benefits for building muscle mass, maintaining muscle mass as you age, bone density, but also cognitive benefits and preventing cognitive decline in people as they age, like literally everybody, young and old. Like it's beneficial for traumatic brain injuries repair. And then, I've got someone that I've become friends with over Instagram, and she's, got, liver disease, and so she talked to her, I think it's called a hepatologist, and there's not enough research on it. I don't want you taking creatine. And so it's like, so with that mindset, everything from, there are people whose bodies are putting it into severe cold and triggering this like survival mode, basically, isn't going to be beneficial. So always talk to your doctor. I'm not a doctor, always consult before making any lifestyle big changes. But what I do want to provide to people is stuff that is for most people, run it by your doctor, but it's going to be, helpful. And I think cold exposure is one of those things that is pretty universally accepted to be beneficial. There's other things, that people are like, oh, that's kind of, it's not a real thing. It's pseudoscience. It's, whatever you want to say. But I think most people are in agreement on the science of the cold plunge, that it has a lot of benefits. And so one of those is just the basic, like we know if you roll an ankle, you put ice on it because it reduces inflammation. So if your body has inflammation, if it has soreness, then putting it into really cold water can be beneficial. It can reduce inflammation and swelling. It can even help with like lactic acid. Your body has a certain way of like, filtering out lactic acid and things like that, where when you get cold, pretty much all your blood goes into the middle of your body to protect the organs to save your life, essentially. And so it's like the body or the blood sort of leaves your extremities and then returns to it. And there can be sort of a filtering out of some lactic acid and stuff that can happen. But there's other benefits as well. And one of them is on the nervous system and that shock to it. They found that people that are like in the midst of a panic attack can actually get out of that by exposing themselves to cold. And so just that sort of almost shocks your nervous system into like a reset. So it can be, it's crazy because you're like all tense getting into it and you feel nervous and anxious about getting in. And then the result though afterwards is actually, the sense of calm, and it does release dopamine, they found for up to 3 hours after. So you're going to have, a lot of like that good feeling from the dopamine release. And even for fat loss and calorie burn, your body's working extra hard to heat itself back up. And so, so that's a big piece there.
Yeah. And I think I can second that, because given how hot Singapore is, the ice bath and the dopamine, but
it's 4 days summer.
Hey fellas, I just realized my computer's not plugged in, so I just got the low battery sign. Let me plug that in. All right. That should be maybe. Why aren't we charging? Okay,
cool.
We're charging now.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Actually, I just wanted to say that this whole cold bath thing, right, is also quite deeply ingrained into Asian culture as well. So if you look at countries that have what do they call it, onsen, so all these I can't remember what's the English term for it. They always have a section where it is ice cold water, and they will recommend that you take a plunge in, stay in it for up to a minute, and immediately go into the hot water, right? So it's like 60 degrees. What is 60 degrees? It's going to feel like 80 because you were just in like 4, and then repeat it 3 or 4 times, right? So I guess the whole idea is it helps to improve your blood circulation, gets your heart pumping. And I tried that, and what I realized is in such a cold country, you can just walk out and you don't feel the icy bite of the cold wind anymore for a short period of time, of course, right? Because your heart is already pumping, your body is really warm, and you just feel light after that, and the dopamine kicks in, you feel great. So yeah, of course, like you said, check with your doctor if your heart can take it, right? But it's something that people have been doing for years and years on end already. So I think that it has to be based on something, and I totally agree with what you just said.
Yeah. And I think a balance, like viewpoint of like, modern medicine, but also like, I really believe in like the integrative and functional medicine. And so much of that is just going back to what cultures have done, for millennia, basically prior, where it's, they found these things that work, that there's natural ways to treat things. And, even stuff we don't even think about where they weren't consciously doing it, but it's like, how often does your skin touch the earth, and it's like, I realized like I rarely did that. I've got rubber shoes between me and the earth at all times. And it's like they found that the earth has a certain like electrical charge. And when your body has an electrical charge, it like dumps these negative electrical ions basically. And it's really been shown to reduce inflammation in your body. And they found that it really accelerated recovery from injuries when people would spend 25 to 30 minutes just grounding barefoot, just your skin touching the earth. And so again, we're probably one of the first cultures in the last, 100 years that just have, less time than that probably, but just have very little contact, on a daily basis with the earth. And I think previous, cultures probably 80% of their day was outdoor and, in contact with one way or another, and so, yeah, so there's just a lot of things like, it's revolutionary to our current culture, but not necessarily like revolutionary to, humanity, and just, bringing those things back in. And you mentioned the hot cold contrast. That's a big part of it. So I'll do this. My gym's fortunate enough to have an infrared sauna, a regular sauna, and a cold plunge there that I can do. And so I'll do sauna first and I get the benefits of that, and then end with the cold after that. So, yeah.
Nice. Right. Aloysius, do you have anything?
I think pretty much we have heard a lot from Craig, and typically for our podcast we end off with that advice, pun intended, dad giving advice to people. And Craig, we would very much love to hear, certain advice from you, being a dad of 2, how you go about with the journey and, reclaiming back second prime. Is there any advice you would like to, give out to our listeners as, some tips and guidance?
Yeah. I think like I'd be remiss coming on here and, knowing that you guys have, background in the faith to not talk a little bit about that. And so, I think that that's just such a foundational part of who I am and of my recovery as well. And my why, when you talk about find your why, I used to think that was corny and cheesy and, and it wasn't really a big motivator for me until I got a why. Once I had a why, then it's like, I get it. Like that makes sense. And so, and so kids and, family, it's so hard and it's so tiring, but it's the biggest why you'll ever find, on this side of heaven, essentially. And as I mentioned, my faith, just wanting to bring that into it. Like so much of my recovery was precipitated on like 2 sides of the same coin, where you had to reach a point where I was going to do everything in my control that I could to reclaim my health. And then simultaneously, when I'm all in, like I'm going to do everything to control everything that I can, surrendering control of everything outside of my control. And that's where my faith like played such an instrumental role. Like just say like I could do all these things and I might not get better, but you know what? Like even if I don't, like God is still God. He's still good, and I have everything that I need, in Christ. And so to live in this finite reality, give everything I can to be able to show up here while I'm on this earth, in every way possible in all my relationships, and also having this eternal perspective that this earth, this time here is just a mist. It's not all that there is, and eternity is so much, almost more important than our health and our families and our things like that. And so just, it's kind of seems like almost those are contradictions. Like I'm going to control everything I can, but then letting go of control, of everything that you can't control, and just knowing that like God is good and God is wise and God is powerful. And so whatever he deems and ordains like for my life, like is what's best for me, even if I don't understand that. And that's the essence of faith right there. It's just trusting that no matter what comes my way, that God's got me and he's good. And so I don't have to try to control those things that I can't control. And so, I think we run ourselves ragged so much with anxiety because we're trying to control things that weren't meant for us to control. And so getting to a place of peace, even while I'm giving my all to recovery, was really huge. So, just wanted to add that in there.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for sharing, Craig. Yeah, we love it.
Could I add one more thing from Dad?
Sure, please.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Go
ahead.
Hey,
so just one other thing I wanted to add, just from the dad advice. And when I got diagnosed with cancer, it really triggered a fear that I wasn't aware that I had. And I'd always tried to, again, live out my faith, like Paul says, to live as Christ, to die as gain. And so really not a lot of fear of my own death or my own mortality. But having kids really changed that. It wasn't that I was afraid, for myself of being gone, but like this huge fear of like abandoning my children at an age, in which they need me the most. Like, this, and then, and the other side of it is like, will they even remember me? If if I die when I don't remember much from when I was 2, 3, 4 years old. And so and then imagining like what that would do to them and what they would go through in life, not having a parent, and so that was like a huge fear for me. And that's been great perspective for me too. I think that it is such an overwhelming thing to have the responsibility of being a father and to keep showing up every day, and to be exhausted yourself and to not have time for yourself, because you're giving it away to your family and to your kids. And, the one thing that I always want to encourage people and come back to is just be present, be in the moment, and don't wish away the days. It's so easy on a hard day to be like, I can't wait till they're a little older. And, then when they're older, I'll get more sleep, or when they're older, it'll be, more calm and I can, have time for myself and to, invest in my health and everything like that. But this time is so fleeting, it's so impactful, your role as a father. And so just don't wish it away, be present and enjoy it now, and don't have it be one of those situations where, now that the kids are out of the house or they're grown, now I reflect back on it. I miss, even though it was chaotic, I miss it. Like, it's that whole, what is wisdom? It's, when hindsight becomes foresight, when you're able to look, ahead instead of waiting and learning the hard way. And so that's what I try to bring into parenting and want to encourage you guys and just anybody else, is just, have the foresight to know how precious this time is and how impactful and how fleeting it is, and don't wait for it to pass. When I went through that cancer and I had that fear really come up, one of the things that was like therapeutic for me, and I think kind of a neat idea as a dad, which brought me a little bit of peace, was to write a letter to my kids each year, I think on their birthday or whenever it is, and write it from the perspective as if, that's the last letter you're going to be able to write them almost. You don't have to be like really dark or anything like that. But like, if something were to happen to me, they would have these letters that tell them how much they mean to me, how much joy they brought to me, even if they can't remember those times themselves. like they have it from my words. And I think a neat thing is to have that to give to them. If nothing does happen to you, and when they leave for college, to have a binder of all those letters, and I'm not going to give it to my kids, the letter each year on their birthday. I'm just writing it for them, and then they'll have it. If something happens to me, they've got this binder full of letters that lets them know how much they mean to their dad, and my favorite parts and the things I want to instill to them. And then they've also got when they leave home to go to school or to college or to move out or whatever, they've got these words from their dad. And so I think that's just like a really neat thing. And for me, it was really, like I said, almost therapeutic for this fear that I have that if something happens to me, like, are they going to remember me? Are they going to know how their dad felt about them? And so, so just wanted to kind of give that idea out there too.
Awesome. Yep. You guys can still hear me now, right?
Yep, we hear you now.
Okay. I guess what I wanted to say just now was to thank you for this opportunity to share with us. We are 12 hours apart. We are like on opposite sides of the globe, right? But the things that you have shared and the challenges that you experienced, I guess, is universal, right? So thank you for sharing your perspective and your challenges and from your side of the things. And I guess, regardless of race, language, or religion, everybody can relate to such situations. We have similar situations as well. So thank you for sharing how you actually went through it and where you are today. I think it's in a great place. So thank you so much once again.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks, Craig. That was very powerful sharing that you have shared with us. We really appreciate that. Yeah. So to our fellow listeners, if you would like to follow Craig on Instagram, his IG handle is second_prime. Second as in 2ND_prime. You can check him out, follow him on IG. And if you like our podcast, feel free to subscribe, follow, and listen to our podcast while we continue to share more insights on parenting journeys and being dads. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.